there's a lot to look at, whether it's politics, the National Assembly, the economy. There's a potpourri of issues within the time we have we want to examine. This morning with our guest, Mr. Okolugbo is a public and political affairs analyst. He's also a consultant on communication and strategy to the Senate President. Mr. Okolugbo, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so let's get started with...
Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. We heard you, sir. Let's get started with that conversation that happened yesterday between the Senate President. We saw the release as well between the Senate President and the ambassador, United States ambassador to Nigeria, Mr. Mills, that happened yesterday, I think, at the National Assembly. And this is coming at the time when we've been added to that, some people call it the notorious list. In fact, they say 67% of countries on that list, Africans. Nigeria has now been added to the list of visa restrictions. So there could be delays, there could be denials, and borderline is about vetting system, issues around security, things that worry the American national interest in terms of their security. So what can you tell us as an outcome of that meeting between the Senate President and the U.S. ambassador to Nigeria?
That meeting was held behind closed doors, and the basic thing about it is that at least there's a relationship between the National Assembly and the American government. The ambassador represents the president, and he needed to have a one-on-one with the National Assembly, and the meeting went well, but most of the decisions were taken behind closed doors. But when you talk about the decisions that America is taking in terms of a relationship, at this point in time, engagement is what is needed, and that's the engagement you're seeing. And it's a good thing that the ambassador, Richard Mills Jr., initiated that visit, actually came on that visit, and it's a step in the right direction.
So sometimes, from a public affairs analyst position, does it worry you, and maybe as it bothers a lot of Nigerians, how we end up on some of these notorious lists time and again? We can argue to the effect that we're not the only ones on the list, but we can also argue that there are several other people that are not on the list. In terms of the image of our country, that's the premise on which I'm asking this question, Mr. Okolugbo.
Well, it bothers me because I have been to the United States of America 10 times, and the 10 times I've been to the United States of America, all the times I've traveled, I have never extended my stay more than 3 weeks. There are times I've even stayed a week. And so a few of the Nigerians who decide to abuse the privilege of the visas, especially B1 and B2, have given us a bit of this seemingly bad light. But if you look at the percentage, the American government accepted that it was about 5%. 5% is a bit negligible, in my own opinion, as a public affairs analyst. And I don't think 5% is enough for you to decide to blacklist us at this material point in time. I think the engagement that has gone on yesterday and a lot of things that had been discussed, which I am not privileged to speak about here, it's a step into giving them the right direction. There is no Nigerian that we know of that has carried out any terrorist attack in America. And the fact that we don't have any Nigerian that has carried out any terrorist attack in America, it's a pointer to the fact that we shouldn't be one of those countries that should be blacklisted. Yes, we have our own internal crisis here. We have the Boko Haram, we have the ISWAP, we have the killings in the north, especially in the northeast, and lately in the north central. We are not denying that fact. But the truth is, we have to call a spade a spade. We have not had one Nigerian that has been said to have carried out a terrorist action in the United States of America.
And that's a fair point, Mr. Okolugbo, particularly when you look at the list of countries. Nigeria, in terms of percentage, is third to the last when it comes to overstaying. But that's really half of the story. Very well. But that's half of the story, Mr. Okolugbo. And I want us to, as much as possible, paint the full picture. So for the, whether you call it the B1, B2, or B1/B2, that's the 5%. But you see, for the FMJ categories of visas, those are the either student visas, whether you call it vocation, and all of that, it's approximately 12%. Again, it is low when you compare to other nations. But when you look at the volume itself, Mr. Okolugbo, I think 2 years ago or thereabouts, Nigeria had 1% of the total non-immigrant visas, which was, let's say, about 10 million visas. Nigeria got 1%. That's about 100,000 plus. So if you do the math, in terms of volume, Nigeria has more. You get what I mean? Because
no, that's about 10,000. 1%.
Exactly.
1%.
Nigeria is one of the countries that gets most of those visas, top 15 for America. So those other countries that we were, put in the same group don't have as much visas granted to them. So in terms of volumes, numbers, Nigeria has more than them, but in terms of percentage, it is low, right? Just to paint the full picture, Nigeria gets a huge chunk of the visas. But that's by the way. But here's my point. In terms of conversations, because I know that a lot of Nigerians will be looking at the government to say, what is going to happen? Because there must be some sort of representation for Nigeria. Let these issues be placed on the table. Because for some of the other countries that were on the list prior, some of them were removed because the US government said, we've had conversations with their government, we've seen that things are improving. So would there be someone to speak for Nigerians? And I know that for some people, it's not a big deal. But for some others, it is major, whether they want to go study or just further business, because the B1, B2 is also affected, and that's business in some sense. So do you think there will be some sort of representation for those Nigerians?
Of course, it is a big deal. For example, I have a son that is an American, and who knows in future he might want to settle in America, and I will want to go visit my son. So it's a big deal for a whole lot of Nigerians if you look at it from that perspective. And that's why it's very important for the American government to relate with us, not from the hostile perspective. It's a pity that the security situation has given us this negative impression. But we need to be able to engage, like you rightly said. And the president has done very well. If you notice, at the National Assembly, we had 3 non-career ambassadorial nominees have been confirmed. And a couple others have been cleared by the Foreign Affairs Committee, and most likely would also be confirmed. And I think the president is in a hurry now to ensure that we would have a permanent representation at the United Nations and at least a high commissioner in Washington. And when we have a high commissioner in Washington and a permanent representation in the United Nations, we will now engage more with the government of America, and they will seem to understand that some of this negative, I mean, I have not rubbed out the fact that we are having security challenges, but some of these things are also propaganda being perpetrated to put and cast us in this kind of light to make it impossible for us to be able to have a cooperation with the American government and deal decisively with this extremists in the north causing most of these killings.
All right, let's get to other issues now, and perhaps this would be a good opportunity for you to help dispel concerns about the Senate President's health. Being the third man, the number 3 man of the country, it's quite important for Nigerians, to have a clear understanding of the state of health of the Senate President once and for all. And this is coming especially against the backdrop of rumors, many of them unfounded, about what happened to him in the last 48 hours. Help us understand exactly where the office of the Senate President stands on this one.
But you have answered the question already. It's unfounded, and that's the answer.
But what exactly is the state of health?
What I've come to realize,
of the Senate President?
What I've come to realize it's not only been the Senate President, even Minister Wike. The other time they also said he was. In fact, they said he was in comatose. Some said he had stroke, and the next day he was commissioning PrEP. You saw Minister Wike. In fact, he was in your studio. He had a live program with Shenwo Kimbaloye. The day before, they had said he was in coma. So I think it's just what is happening with social media. We must regulate social media. Everybody's a publisher when you are on social media, and they don't seem to understand really that there is a law that says that what you are not sure of, you don't even propagate it. You don't share it. Talk less of when you originate it. The Senate President is very hale and hearty, and you saw him. He's been sitting. He sat yesterday. He sat the day before yesterday, and that answers the question.
All right, let's get to other matters now. And this is just coming through from the office of the former Attorney General of the Federation, Abubakar Malami. Of course, we've had his representatives speak on, what they consider to be unfair treatment of the former Attorney General in the last couple of days. But this has to do with a statement addressing Chapter 9 of the Salami report, where operatives of the EFCC carried out raids on the offices of the former Attorney General of the Federation. And Mr. Malami is saying that the current EFCC chairman should recuse himself from this on the basis of bias. Help us understand what exactly is happening, because there are comments and concerns to the effect that the current administration is using the commission to go after past officials of the Buhari cabinet that seems to have moved their allegiances away from the current administration to other parties or coalitions. So is that the case here?
I don't think Mr. Malami is being fair. As a former chief law officer of this country, I expected more from him. What he's actually reducing himself to, it's blackmail, not even a subtle blackmail on the EFCC. When you talk of a report that was never gazetted, a report that was never published, a report that was seen by Nigerians as orchestrated because you wanted to remove Mago at that time, and you said because of that report is why you would not want to answer to alleged criminal infractions you have committed, you are trying to challenge the powers of the state. The powers of the EFCC is very clear, that to investigate and prosecute economic and financial crimes. And I think we must give it to Ola Olukoyede. He has made a whole lot of difference in the fight against the fight against corruption. In the last 2 years he's been in office, we haven't seen any EFCC chairman perform like him. With due respect to others who have been in that position, you know, the 753 houses that have been confiscated, even though he's on appeal. We have heard his report where he was said to have given 100 billion seed capital to NEL Fund and to the consumer credit scheme. And I mean, the rate of recovery has been such that you can see that it has never been like this. I speak because I try to speak with facts. Now,
Mr. Okolugbo,
the impression that is given is that it is only the opposition former ministers that are being arrested. But Ngige is still a member of the APC, and he's still in detention, if my memory is right.
Pardon me, sir. You say is the most exceptional, but we just raised questions earlier on today about the cases against certain officials that we have not heard anything about, and perhaps that is debatably far from exceptional. What happened to the cases of allegations against
former
Minister of Humanitarian Affairs? We haven't heard anything about that particular case. Perhaps I don't know if you want to answer on this one on behalf of the current.
No, I'm not the spokesperson. Leadership. I'm not the spokesperson of the EFCC.
You're not the
I'm only looking at the facts that are before us.
But you have also spoken in favor of the EFCC just moments ago.
Oh yeah, because I need to be realistic. It's the facts that we
petition.
Can see.
Pardon me, sir. We could also ask about the petition against former Delta State Governor. Since his defection, we haven't heard about that as well.
Ifeanyi Okowa. Yes, Ifeanyi Okowa, I will tell you, that petition was written by, may his soul rest in peace, Papa Clark. And that petition was one that has been investigated by the EFCC. And you remember he was brought in for questioning, and he was released on bail. I would want to believe that instead of us to pander to the former EFCCs that used to do media trial, let us also give it to this EFCC who rather want to maybe go to court and get a cockshot case than a case that they are not sure of, and at the end of the day, you find them losing out in court. Because you notice that EFCC has lost a lot of cases, you must also agree. So one would also look at it from that perspective. I wouldn't know the state of the case against Dr. Ifeanyi Okowa, incidentally, who was my governor. But at least he was brought in for questioning, and he was made clear by the EFCC that they were still investigating his case.
And we hope that his sins have not been forgiven finally after his defection to the All Progressives Congress. And I'm quoting a member of the All Progressives Congress, by the way. So I wonder if those commendations are absolute rather than relative. Jeffrey, you have the next question.
Mr. Okolugbo, so we can even add to the list. Some of us are throwing a challenge. We can say, yes, he's done some great things, going after Yahoo boys, made some recoveries. But I think one of the general mark of how this commissioner will be, I know it's not the one we're talking about, but just since this conversation segued in this direction, is Yahaya Bello. He said he would rather resign if he doesn't see through, because for him to make that kind of comment, he believes that Yahaya Bello did something wrong against the Nigerian state. So that may be a milestone, that may be a marker to decide whether or not he
No,
has
but
done a great job.
Geoffrey, sorry to butt in, but in Yahaya Bello's case, remember he's being tried by 2 courts. He's being tried by a Federal High Court and the FCT High Court in Abuja. And I think that shows the fact that they are determined. Why I followed Yahaya Bello's case was that was a case, if you remember very well, that was very celebrated when they tried to arrest him and all the issues that came with it. And the fact that Yahaya Bello is still practically the leader of the APC in Kogi State. So the fact that 2 cases are still ongoing in 2 courts, the FCT High Court and the Federal High Court, at this point in time, you must also know that it's beyond the EFCC. We must also put our judiciary under trial here. Because most of these cases are being delayed by the judiciary.
You know, the reason,
that is why
Mr. Okolugbo, my apologies.
A reawakening, yeah.
Yes, my apologies is to the fact that if the EFCC comes after you, it is believed that we believe they know that you did something wrong, an infraction as alleged. So they want to get justice for the Nigerian state because you've made some great comments about it. So
that's true.
Because at the end of the day, if this Yahaya Bello case falls flat on his face, it will look like this is another media trial to mess up his name. But
that's why, Geoffrey, I'm saying that we should put the judiciary on trial here, because if 2 cases are going on in the FCT High Court and in the Federal High Court, and they are not able to speed up the trial of Yahaya Bello, who will you blame? In fact, most of the cases we have had, the corruption cases we have had and criminal cases we have had, has been the fault of the judiciary. For example, look at me, I have a case in the appeal court since 2013. It's an interlocutory appeal, not even a final appeal, and I don't even have the date of the next hearing. So the judiciary must do something about this backlog of cases they keep ongoing. It's frustrating. I think what we should do, if we should be making a proposal, is to have a special court for trial of corruption cases, so that these cases will not be delayed unnecessarily. You know, lawyers want to make money. They bring all kinds of bottlenecks. They bring all kinds of delays. They bring all kinds of frivolous motions. So it's the judiciary you should actually put on the hot spots here, Geoffrey, if you must agree with me.
Well,
in all honesty.
Everybody is, at the end of the day, it's about the fact that we know monies are being stolen. EFCC raises alarm and then sometimes goes to court. But at the end of the day, we want to see big men, former governors, former ministers in jail. But it never ends. There are very few cases. We can literally mention it at the tip of our finger. I can also agree with you that the judiciary has a lot to do. Hearing that since 2013, an interlocutory injunction appeal, not even the full appeal is no. I don't even understand that at all. But it's a conversation we'll continue to hold for. But let's move on now to other issues. Let's talk a bit more about politics of the National Assembly. Now, the All Progressives Congress has made very strong inroads. I always say that they are successful politically, because when you have all these governors moving for whatever reason, I don't know the reason, and then all these lawmakers moving, so they are just getting fatter by the day, or getting bigger, if you will. That's the right language, by the day. So super majority or significant majority in the Senate, for instance. The worry is that the National Assembly, by perception, is seen as a rubber stamp. That is the perception. Whether it's reality is another thing. And Nigerians have a reason. They can tell you, for this, we wanted this to happen, but our lawmakers did this. There was a classic case of where the polity was divided. For instance, the Rivers State case, the polity was divided for and against the whole Rivers emergency issue and the suspension of governors. But what happened was that the lawmakers were united in that decision. So if you're representing the people and constituents are divided, how come our representatives are united? So it looks like we are in different train altogether. I'm saying that to say, if the perception is that the National Assembly is rubber-stamped, now that the Senate has a majority, where does that leave us as a people?
I think that's the wrong perception, and the perception that have stood with the National Assembly. They want a National Assembly that would always be confrontational. And I can tell you that the 10th National Assembly has not been confrontational, but has made a lot of inroads. For example, if you ask me, 5 regional development commissions have been not only been the baby of the National Assembly, but has been signed into law, and actual representatives of these commissions have been sworn into office. Before now, Geoffrey, you agree that the Niger Delta Development Commission was the only one we had from 2000. Then we had the Northeast Development Commission. And what am I trying to say? What I'm trying to say is that you don't have to go on a tirade of being combative like Adara Modu would always tell you, the spokesperson of the Senate, who is doing so well. Will tell you that, look, what Nigerians want to see us do is to actually go into a boxing match. You don't have to go into a boxing match to be able to achieve what you need to achieve. The Security Committee meetings that were held in the 6 geopolitical zones, a lot of Nigerians did not recognize the fact that someone like Senator Jimoh Ibrahim had moved a motion on the very critical issue of our security concerns before Ted Cruz started even talking about killings of Christians or genocide in America. We tend to, look beyond our National Assembly and, look outside more. But if you look at the facts, like you said in your intro with that person that you're speaking to in Enugu, a lot has been happening there, but people don't tend to look at it because they want to see a fight. And if they don't see a fight, they don't appreciate what is happening in the National Assembly. But it is the only arm of government that is affected. Even when you have a military coup, you have the executive and you have the judiciary, you never have the legislative arm. The basic principles is check and balances, making laws, ensuring. For example, the budget is not out. The National Assembly has frowned at it and has clearly said the executive should speed up on the issue of the budget. The medium-term expenditure framework and the fiscal strategy paper only came towards the close of the year. And we are talking about budget 2024, 2025, and 2026. So there's a lot that is going on that you need to interrogate. But people don't tend to interrogate these things. And even when you bring these facts, their minds are already made up, they're biased about it, and they don't want to look at the details. To accept the fact that, look, these milestones have been achieved, and a lot can still be achieved. Look at the minimum wage. It was passed in record time. Wow. People earn 70,000. A drop in the ocean, some will say, but at least better than the 30,000 that they were earning. And so many other things that you look at that has been achieved within this period. Look at the tax bill.
If I can come in here quickly,
because of the governor's resistance.
And that's where I'm going to next, the tax laws. And I want to show you this image in June when President Bola Tinubu signed the laws. You see, the Senate president was right beside him. They had done a lot of work about this.
I can't even see the image, but you can go.
Don't worry, Nigerians have seen it. Nigerians, you know that image so well. You've seen that image time and again. Nigerians are the ones seeing it right now. But here's my question, Mr. Okolugbo. Yesterday on the floor of the House, a group of concerned lawmakers said that the tax laws that they passed in the National Assembly and subsequently signed by the President Bola Tinubu was altered after the passage. So they are saying that what we passed is not what the president is signing right now under the watchful eyes of the Senate president. Mr. Okolugbo, can you vouch?
No, please, let me correct you.
Was indeed signed.
That did not happen in the Senate.
No, I said on the floor of the House of Reps. Those were my words. But the point is, it is the same law.
You said under the watchful eyes of the Senate president.
No, I said the president was signing it under the watchful eyes of the Senate president. Those were my words.
Okay, that's better.
So the question is, can you vouch that this is what was indeed passed by the National Assembly that is being signed by the president?
I can't answer that question, unfortunately, because I'm not a member of the House of Reps, neither am I a senator. So, but when this bill was passed into law, it was taken to the president. We will look at the bill. There were consultants, don't forget. There were consultants who also handled parts of this. Mistakes can happen. I'm not saying that he's right, but there can be typographical mistakes. When consultants have, for example, during the joint sitting of the Constitutional Review Committee, there were issues that came up at the final sitting, and they noticed that it was a typographical error. And a lot of people said, oh, the suggestions I made were not captured, this was not done. So it's a work in progress. That is not to say somebody was trying to be deceptive.
So what kind of process then will take off after this? After the lawmaker on the floor of the House has raised the issues?
But for the House of Rep, I can tell you for free what he has raised. Yeah. The Speaker is going to look at it, going to compare the documents, and it will be corrected. It has happened over and over again in the National Assembly. Those corrections are made. Even the President will decline to sign a bill because of mistakes. You've heard the Senate President read a couple of times the letters of the Senate President saying, from the President saying, look, I'm declining to sign this bill because this is a mistake.
It's not a mistake, and I value the point you're making, but these are very grave issues. Talked about several oversight, accountability, and reporting mechanisms that were approved by the Parliament. He said they were removed in the final act. So if it was just typographical error, instead of saying is, said were. If you're saying
no, but what you can suggest is there should be an investigation. No, if there's an investigation and they find out that it was done deliberately, then I'm sure they will find those. It's easy to find those who are culpable. But for now, I would believe it has to be with typographical error, whatever mistakes that were seen at the House of Reps. That's what I believe, because it is too dangerous for you to embark on such on such a venture, because these things are recorded. Every sitting of the House of Rep and the Senate is always recorded. It's like a court process. So it's not possible for you to think that you can alter it without them referring to what has happened. And that's why if there's a mistake, they also, see it.
All right, Mr. Ken Okolugbo, we must thank you so much. Public affairs analyst and now the consultant on communication and strategy to the Senate President. Thank you, sir, for coming on the program. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
We'll take a break, and when we come back, we will talk about the aviation sector. We'll be joined by one of the CEOs of one of Nigeria's airlines, given now that the prices or the price of airfare is just over the roof, literally. So we'll get to those conversations and potpourri of issues around the aviation sector that we want to delve into in just a moment. Stay with us.